Hi, Shmuel Holiday. Welcome to October 7th. Thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I'll just give you maybe a 20-second introduction. I'm a young American Jew who's lived in Israel for a very long time. And one question that I focus on way more than others is how do we make the case for Israel in a way that people, especially young people, actually listen to? Because I think we have a very interesting problem. We have incredible historians, policy experts, organizations, and the most detailed reports. But the average 16, 17, 18-year-old American isn't reading those 50-page reports of what's going on in Gaza, of the history of the Jewish people. At the end of the day, they're just scrolling on Instagram, they're watching a 20-second video, they hear someone say Israel's committing apartheid or genocide, and if nobody could give them a clear answer in language they could understand, that accusation starts becoming a lot more than just that. And that's really where I see my role. I try to take complicated arguments and turn them into short, memorable responses that people could actually understand, remember, and use. I always say, if you can't answer the question within one sentence, you can't answer the question at all. And that's what I've been building through my social media work so far.
That's amazing. So important to simplify. I love that. That's such a great mission that you took on yourself. Could you give us just like one example of a complicated issue that you can answer in under 1 minute?
Of course. So this is just one example from one of my videos, which was when the notorious bad actor, anti-Semite, xenophobic, we could probably go on for a very long time, Nick
Yeah.
Fuentes, said that Jews did not fight in the Revolutionary War.
Oh,
Although this might not be completely politically correct, my quick 2-second retort was literally, neither did Catholics. Nick Fuentes is Catholic. It's true that there were some Catholics who fought, and at the same time, there were many Jews who fought as well. So you don't necessarily have to be smart, you just have to be right. Because once you bring that up, he's not on the offense anymore. He's on the defense because we know that 98% of the people who fought the Revolutionary War were Protestant. But all you need is those three
mm.
words. Neither did Catholics to explain that. You don't need to go any further. And that's what young people like saying on social media.
Wow, that's amazing. I have a bunch of questions for you, but I would actually just like to hear more examples if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's completely fine. So for example, this was another one of my videos where someone accused Jews of 9/11.
Mhm.
So all I need is just one picture. You know, they say one picture is worth 1,000 words. One picture of Palestinians celebrating the collapse of the Twin Towers. It was about that video was about 5 words, slightly longer, in which I said, wasn't the Israelis, this is the Palestinians, take a look. And
Yeah,
you go on because once you make it simple, once you make it fun to watch, people will watch it. And ultimately, I would say that one of the things that the Israeli crowd doesn't exactly try to reach is though are those young people who aren't necessarily anti-Israel. You know what? They literally just want to have a good time on Instagram.
yeah.
They'll be the ones joking about memes, the ones joking about pop culture. And all of a sudden, if you could bring up a good claim about Catholics, about Nick Fuentes, about the fact that 9/11 was, if anyone was happy about it, it wasn't the Jews, it was the Muslims. Then that people listen to that, internalize it, and in fact, it could actually change people's opinions. I
That's
remember
amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
I was recently at a summer program at Harvard,
Yeah.
and there were a lot of very intellectual people. And obviously, I got into a couple arguments. I wore my kippah throughout my entire time there. And once you have a kippah, you're kind of bringing on those questions.
Yeah.
you need to be ready for all the hard ones. So I would have a hour conversation, 2 hour conversation with people. I would go in, we would talk about all the depth of whether the Israeli counter offense was in Rafah was strategical, logical. We went in certain stages, months of the war, talked about those little differences. And you know, at the end of the day, we went back and forth. I would say they brought up some good claims, but when you just go back and forth in that regard, you're not really convincing anyone. But here's the thing, I actually had one very intellectually honest student at Harvard who, after our conversations, I actually sent him the link to my Instagram account. And I simply told him, take a look at this. I'm happy to debate you, argue with you as much as you want. Just take a look at some of my videos, especially the ones regarding the far right.
Yeah.
Fortunately, a lot of those people in that demographic, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds who are in Islam, are the radical right. The guy came to me the next day and said, I was obviously not informed enough. I'm gonna take more time, look into it a lot more. And that's something that even through hours of conversation, bringing up facts, bringing up polls, something he was that wasn't able to change his mind. But once you're able to change someone's mind, because once it's that simple, people start reflecting upon themselves and asking themselves, wait a minute, if this 16-year-old kid was able to give you a 2-second retort, why am I even thinking about it so deeply?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how deep it is, and that's why I think that when we keep it to that format, to that demographic, it works so well.
That's amazing. But how did you become that 16-year-old kid? Like, what happened to you specifically that made you take on yourself this role?
That's a great question. So, obviously, growing up Jewish and living in Jerusalem in Israel,
Mm.
Israel was never an abstract political issue to me. You know, any Jew in the world has an immediate connection to Israel, whether it be through prayers, you know, we say 3 times a day that we want to go back to Jerusalem, or through the fact, through the Zionist dream,
Yeah.
that there is no other country but Israel. Eventually, if anything happens to the Jewish people. So overall, Israel was always home.
Yeah.
But then October 7th happened. And I guess basically like every Israeli, I remember the shock of that day and what came afterward. But I would say that there's a difference between understanding something intellectually and, you know, having your own life personally affected by it. And this is what actually happened slightly later, but by the same perpetrators, which were the radical fragments of the Palestinian cause. So this was actually the beginning of this school year. So I haven't started school yet, but
Yeah.
last school year I started with a very bad experience because
Oh,
to me, one of the main moments that it really touched me was when my school counselor, who I was very close with, um, Yaakov Pinto, was
okay.
murdered. He was in Jerusalem. He was literally just a civilian. In fact, you know, he was our school counselor. That's what he did for a living. On his way back from school in the middle of the day,
No, I'm so
back from
sorry.
school to his house, he was standing in a bus stop. And then we heard that the our school
Wow.
counselor was no more. And you know, I remember the moment very vividly. It was so our principal had come into class. You know, our principal's usually a pretty positive person. He's someone who will crack a joke, bring everyone to have a good time. But he came in looking very startled to class. I remember like it was yesterday. He
Wow.
came into class and he mumbled something to the teacher and held his arm and walked out of the class. Very ominous looking. And we didn't really know what was happening, but we were kind of quiet, which was kind of bizarre for my class that we were quiet because we understood that something wasn't right. And later in the day, we heard that someone we actually knew, someone from our school, someone who was part of our life, was murdered. And so if you would say that there's one moment
Yeah.
where the atmosphere really changed for me. It was when my dear counselor, Yakov Pinto, so close to me, was murdered. And here's actually I'm not uh, the worst part of the story, where they put salt on your wound kind of thing. Where after his unfortunately burial, his funeral, I actually looked his name up. I wanted to see what the world had to say
Oh,
about my incredible school counselor who had just been murdered. So I look online, takes me about 5 seconds, Yakov Pinto, and then I see a headline from I think it was CNN, where I see the headline is six illegal settlers were killed in a shooting in occupied land.
oh wow.
Mind you, this was in Jerusalem.
Oh
And when
my
you think about it, his entire life, at least from the Western media's perspective, came down to shoot an illegal shooting in occupied land. That's what his
That's so
entire life came
ridiculous.
down to. I remember seeing that and being extremely set aback. And I realized that unfortunately the anti-Israel rhetoric isn't something that's just on television. That anti-Israel rhetoric affected my school counselor, a friend, someone who had a face, a name, somebody I knew.
Yeah.
And that really did affect the way I see the whole Haspara movement, the whole media, because this was something that was affected directly by by their hatred towards Israel and their need to shift the narrative.
Yeah.
Because when I watched what was happening internationally, I watched October 7th getting questioned, minimized, justified,
Yeah.
turned almost immediately into accusations against Israel, and I realized that there were two battles. One's the physical battle, which, as we say in our prayers, at least every Shabbat, that are blessed, the physical battle in Israel. And then there's the battle of what people believed happened, why it happened, and whether it's insane, but Israel's the only country that has this question. Does it have the right to defend itself?
Yeah.
I mean, I knew at 16, you asked me before, how did I get into this? I knew that I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a diplomat. I definitely wasn't sitting in the Knesset. But one thing I could do is communicate. I had a phone, I had Instagram, had Facebook, and then I thought to myself that there is one thing I could do, and it's
Yeah.
that.
That's amazing. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. This is devastating. I can really feel your pain. I think I speak for all of us when I say I really am so sorry. What
Yeah.
is the one thing that you think that sits in the heart of all the Jew hatred that you're dealing with? Something that if you could make everyone in the world understand, that would be the one thing that you would want to communicate.
One thing that we would, as Jews, would communicate.
Yeah. What's the
uh,
one thing that everyone gets wrong in this battle?
So overall, I would say it's the oppressor-oppressed mindset,
Mm,
where you have a mindset of people thinking that this conflict is a zero-sum game, and
yeah.
you have one side, which which sometimes are labeled as the Israelis, who are offensive, want to attack the other side, which in reality couldn't be farther from the truth. I want to say one thing about Hasbara, which I think we're getting wrong, is the fact that we're fighting about what Israel is doing, and
Yeah.
not our strongest point, which is what Israel is. Because unlike many countries in the world, Israel has a point that consolidates everyone together. The fact that in case of any anti-Semitism, any persecution around the world, Israel will come and save the Jewish community. Whether it be the Jews in Russia, the Jews in Ethiopia,
Yeah.
Israel will come out and save them. So a lot of times right now we're trying to argue about what Israel's doing in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, Iran, which is great. But for the most part, once you just see the country like that, you don't know why we're fighting. I would say that in order to win this Hasbara war, it would be to invoke the stories of the Holocaust. The fact that to a certain extent, that's how Israel was founded. That there were Holocaust survivors in 1948, my great-grandfather included, who fought, who came from concentration camps, from the worst places on earth, as Netanyahu said, literally from the depths of hell. They came in order to fight for the state of Israel. There's a well-known story with this was in Israel's war of independence in 1948, where you had Ben Gurion, who was the commander, and he wanted to know a few months before the war started what the odds that the Jews, the fringe community of 600,000 at the time, would defeat the Arab population, which unfortunately was waging war against them.
Yeah.
So he went to the top strategist that the Jews had. He said, let's give you a month, take your time. The Jewish strategist went all around the Arab bases, the Jewish bases, really analyzed everything he could about war. He came back over a month later. He told Ben Gurion, we have a 50-50% chance to win.
Wow.
Ben Gurion heard those odds and said, let's go for it. Let's fight. You know what?
Yeah.
After close to 2,000 years of exile, those we like those odds.
Oh my God.
Well, here's the crazy part of the story. And it only came out a few years ago because this was something that analyst said on his deathbed.
Oh wow.
He came out publicly to his family and said that in fact, when Ben Gurion asked him what the odds weren't 50% the Jewish people would win. It was more like 10%.
Oh wow, he was lying for them to go for
He was
battle.
lying because he
Oh
knew that
wow.
if he would tell Ben Gurion that there's only a 10% chance, Ben Gurion wouldn't have taken the risk and there wouldn't have been a Jewish homeland. So he took that risk of lying to Ben Gurion, that is
That
pretty
is
bad
something. Yeah.
because people wanted a Jewish state so badly. And even though the odds were just 10%, we
Yeah.
won. And
It seems it's
that's incredible. Yes.
that's incredible. That's incredible. But it seems like we're still in that situation where we're fighting such a big enemy. The other side is so looks so budgeted and organized, and they have like their I don't know anti-Zionism started 1903 by Stalin, and they have all the OIC and the Iran on their side and Qatar and all that. So we're still kind of like in the David Goliath situation since Bible times
Exactly.
today. There's like nothing ever changes. And so we're all David, and you are like such a David. That's amazing.
Thank you so much. But I
Yeah,
think we all have a role to play. And anything I could do, I'm very glad to be doing it.
that's amazing. What gives you hope in this situation? This is such a heavy situation at times, no?
Yeah. That's true. That's a great question. Right now, obviously, there's unfortunately rising animosity towards the Jewish nation, especially in America. But I'll tell you something. We talked about social media before. We
Yeah,
talked about the internet and the consequences of that. The consequences led to the fact that unfortunately, this is crazy because I'm 16 and I remember when it was so much better for us. Then 2000, then 2018, a vast majority of Americans supported Israel. When you compare the net positive and net negative,
yeah.
we have net positive of over 54 points in the general American public. And today, unfortunately, we're slightly underwater. That's within about 8 years. You would probably ask me, wait, Shmuel, doesn't that sound like a reason that we should be concerned?
Yeah.
I mean, th those numbers don't sound great, do they?
Yeah.
Overall, I would say that the only reason why something like that could happen is simply because of social media and because of the internet. Today, people get information so much faster than they would ever get it before. For example, we saw the rise of a certain mayoral candidate in New
Yeah.
York who unfortunately is still mayor and spews the most anti-Israel,
Yeah.
anti-Jewish vitriol almost on a daily basis.
He's
But we
horrible.
have to ask ourselves, wait a minute, wasn't the guy like 33 when he got elected as mayor? I mean, 33, he didn't have any prior experience in public office. He wasn't well known. He was literally just a councilman. And going from that to becoming mayor, literally in over a few months, that's unprecedented. Well, at least the reason I see that is simply because, unlike many politicians in the past, where the youngest a politician would be, as we see right now in the Senate or in Congress, is at least in their late 40s, could they ever get to prominence on the public stage. But once you have social media, that propels any narrative you have or any sort of marketing whatsoever. That's unfortunately how he became mayor. So once we could use that tool, and again, it's a tool. It could
Mm,
be used against us or for us. But
mm.
once we could use that tool, I think that the same way the pendulum shifted against us, it'll shift right back with enough effort because of
I
that
love
social
that.
reach.
I love that. So the thing that depresses us all, basically, that's what gives you hope. The fact that we have tools that we could use actually to our benefit. That's
100%.
amazing.
We have tools, we have information, because at the end of the day, we know that we're right.
Yeah.
Time after time, argument after argument, it's so simple.
Yeah.
These complex people like saying, "Oh, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is so complex."
Yeah, it's
I think
not.
everyone, it's not.
It's
It's not complex. There's one side that always preached for peace. I think Golda Meir said it beautifully. If the Arabs lay down their weapons, there will be peace. If the Jews lay down their weapons, it'll be the end of the state of Israel.
yeah,
There's
it's
nothing more
that
to understand.
simple.
That's the conflict. And when you could portray that on social media with the reach that social media gets, because there are millions of people on social media. One other thing they had right now at Harvard, where I got to see, the general American public, at least for my age group. People there, I'm not kidding you, these are Harvard students. They have 8, 9, 10 hours of screen time a day.
Wow.
So if you channel some of that energy that they have in social media, yeah, which is insane. Those hours, insane. But we put that into pro-Israel rhetoric, which is just true. Within a few seconds of retorts, I think that's how we turn the tide. And I think that's obviously, as you said before, very important for us. And I think that's exactly the point that should bring us hope.
Yeah, so if everyone listening to you here or on YouTube, they could do one thing this week. If you had one thing to ask everyone to do, so of course follow Shmuel Holiday on all the platforms and share and like and everything. Please, everyone, take your phone right now and do that. But if there's like one thing that you would think that everyone would promise to do, give us one thing that you would want us to say on social media. Is that would be the one thing to say something on social media?
Yes, of course. First of all, that's a great question. One, one thing that I would say that overall we should add on social media. Overall, the Jewish nation, the Jewish people are a very loving people. We're a people with a very long history and a great one. The history of community, the history of family. We portray that towards the world. I had the opportunity a few months back to get on stage with Ben Shapiro
Oh wow, so lovely.
in the Jerusalem Theater.
Wow,
It was insane because it was his event in the Jerusalem Theater, and obviously, there are a lot of people who wanted to ask questions. And
yeah,
out of the thousands of questions which were sent, I
wow,
was lucky enough to have my question chosen. I got on stage, And I remember this question pretty much word for word because I think I rehearsed it probably over 100 times before I went on stage. I asked him literally like this. I was 15 at the time. I asked him, Ben Shapiro, at 15 years old, what would you tell me is the
Mm,
one message we as Jews, as young Jews, could get in order to turn the tide of anti-Semitism and hate towards Israel? And
yeah.
remember, that's his field, that's his industry. He told me something so simple. I mean, he actually went on for 5, 10 minutes. It was great. He elaborated on this very much. But just like I do on some of my Instagram videos, I'll shorten it very much. He basically said that as bad as some of the media portrays us to be, we are so much better than our enemies.
Yeah.
Whether it be on a scale of democracy, of human rights, of general Western obedience, we are so much better than our enemies.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we have to remember Israel's a democracy. Israel has pride parades. Israel's a very liberal country, and at the same time, all Arabs, all Jews, anyone from any ethnicity could vote. We are a full democratic nation, and as bad as we are, simply expose the fact that Hamas hasn't had an election for 20 years. And if someone, I guess this is another video, if someone claims that they did have an election 20 years ago, therefore it's a democratic country, just ask them, wait a minute, if they voted in Hamas 20 years ago, then wouldn't you say that they're responsible for what Hamas inflicted? So by the way, almost every part of the rhetoric works in both ways. And it's easy to get that because at the end of the day, it's not such a complicated conflict as we said before. Only there are some fundamental principles, and that's it. That's it on the stage of Instagram. I'm sure that if we would have a debate at Oxford with Ayalon Levy, Mahdi Hassan, it would be a completely different debate. But here it's Instagram. It's a much younger demographic. It's a demographic which wants to
Mm,
be interesting. It's a demographic which at the end of the day came to Instagram in order to enjoy themselves, not in order to be taught, lectured. They simply want to have a good time. And that's when bringing those quick retorts, bringing those quick answers, that's what gets them to change their minds.
so the shortness and the quickness, that's like kind of like Muhammad Ali was his name. This is like to be fast on your feet and to
Yes,
be kind of,
exactly. So,
yeah,
if we could take anything to us today, it would be with us today is it would be, we there are people who accuse us of things, but remember, we are so much more virtuous than our enemies. That's why we're fighting this fight, because we're more virtuous. We know we're right. And at the end of the day, it's not a bad thing to accuse them of some of the heinous things they have done, said, or have intention to do. For example, I think it's very sad to say, but one of the genius of the Palestinian narrative is taking every single accusation about them and
yeah,
inflicting it about Israel before we even started.
yeah,
For example, let's take genocide. We probably heard this label a lot
yeah,
in the last, literally from the day after October 7th. The
yeah.
word
Before we
genocide.
were ever in Gaza, even.
Exactly. On October 8th, there were people screaming genocide.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, we all know the meaning of genocide. It means that you have intent to destroy that nation. The only army, the only battalion that had intent
yeah,
weren't Israeli soldiers who have the lowest militant to civilian ratio in urban warfare. No, it's Hamas. It's the
yeah,
people who came in on October 7th, who the day after we talked about October 8th, who the day after October 7th, on October 8th, talked about how they were going to inflict October 7th again and again and again. If
yeah,
that's not it, if that's not intent, then what is?
yeah. That is the most intent. This is as intent as it gets. It doesn't get more intent
Exactly.
than
It's
that.
so,
Yeah,
yes, it's explicit as well. Or,
yeah,
for example, ethnic cleansing. people like mentioning that as well. That Israel wants to go into Gaza, may ethnic cleanse the area. They invoke some of the things that maybe some ministers said here and there. At the end of the day, what was Gaza before October 7th? It was a piece of land without a single Jew.
Yeah.
A place that if a Jew would walk in, he would probably be assaulted or worse.
Thank
For
you so
example,
much, Moel. We're gonna
of
move to
course,
to
thank you.
Q&A now. So if that's okay with you, thank you
Sure,
so much.
I'd love to have
And
that. Thank you so